Welcome to the Gaggle, where we talk politics in Arizona and beyond. This week, Attorney General Mark Brnovich sues over high tuition costs. President Trump cuts a deal with Democrats. We'll see how Arizona's delegations reacted. But first, hang on to your powdered wig because there's a constitutional planning convention in town. What does that mean, Aaliyah, and what's going on?
So it's a planning convention. It gets a little technical, but basically in the Constitution it says if a majority of states agree to call an Article 5 convention, they can essentially force Congress to allow them to call this convention and introduce an amendment to the Constitution. Now, this isn't that. This is basically states coming together to plan for that convention. It's never happened, so they want to kind of go ahead and do some pre-planning and set up rules and kind of just get everything organized in hopes of getting to that convention. I think they need 7 more states in order to get to the Article 5 convention.
So what is it that they want to see changed in the Constitution?
Basically, it's an issue over balanced budget. They want to force Congress to limit their spending. And there are a multitude of ways they can do it. At this convention, they're not really talking about how exactly they'll do it, but some of the options that we've heard have been things like requiring states, a majority of states, to approve raising the debt ceiling, which would get awfully complicated. There's been some criticism saying, well, what if we need to raise that debt ceiling like we did this week with a hurricane, and then you have to go get the states to do it? What kind of impact would that have? And then there's other things about setting term limits for congressional members, a few other things sort of unrelated to that there's been discussion of too.
And how long, when would this happen if they were to get the other states to sign on?
Well, that's one of the things they are talking about is maybe you require some sort of 90 days, or once all the states do it, you require Congress to kind of address this and call it within 90 days, something like that. And that's one of the rules they're sort of talking about is how would you call it if we get to that point. And again, you need 7 more states. They think they can get it this year, but they've been trying for decades to get it also, so it sort of depends.
So Yvonne, Attorney General Mark Brnovich is suing the Regents over high tuition costs. What's going on?
Well, the Constitution says that university instruction should be as nearly free as possible. And his lawsuit came as an important deadline loomed in this argument over whether or not the Regents are legally offering in-state tuition for Dreamers. Instead of taking that issue on directly, I don't think he wanted to pile on, with that. So he just generally took a look at the Regents' tuition setting policy and decided, look, you guys are charging way too much money. Tuition has risen at exorbitant rates. Let's take a look at this. Let's have a debate about this. Let's see what the courts have to say. It surprised everyone. The governor's office did not know that this was coming. We were sitting in a meeting with them actually at the Republic when it came down. They heard about it from reporters. The Regents didn't know that this was coming. I think they might have started to get inklings that things might not be going their way the night before. And that office has been fielding phone calls from people who thought they had a guy in the Attorney General's office who saw the world their way on this, and they might be rethinking this in a couple of years when it's time for re-election next year.
So, Ron, President Trump cuts a deal with Democratic leadership, and some Republicans are sort of scratching their head. What did members of Arizona's delegation have to say about that?
What was interesting is what they didn't say. What we didn't see was a lot of the folks, especially on the Republican side, stand up and say, this is a good move. Congratulations to the president, or even criticize the president for crossing party lines on this. It was mostly just silence for the most part. There was some dodging and invoking things like the Senate legislative filibuster rules. We need to change that. That's what's forcing this. Andy Biggs was fairly vocal as time passed on this to become more critical of it and saying, essentially, the president made a deal, and you didn't remove things from their legislative agenda. You just kicked it down the road, and this is not a good thing. And on the other side, Democrats really didn't say, hey, congratulations to the president, you did the right thing, we agree with you for once. They just moved on to other things too. They were talking about the Dreamer issue. So it's a lot of, they didn't have much to say about it.
So what are you watching for this week, Yvonne?
Brnovich has ruffled some feathers recently. What for? What does all of it mean?
I want to see if this tax reform package starts to take shape.
Leah?
On that, I'm waiting to see if Trump's coming to town. I hear he's got a multi-state tour, and I know he loves Arizona, so we'll see if he heads back into town.
He sure does. We love Arizona too, so thanks for watching The Gaggle. We'll be back next week.